says its plan to fight electricity theft is proving fruitful. Operation Khanyisa. Now, more than 80,000 tip-offs have been received through this, resulting in over 100 arrests. To tell us more about the project, we are joined in studio by Maboe Maphaka, who is Eskom's Senior Manager in the Energy Trading and Sales Forecasting Department. It's good to have you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much.
How bad is the situation of electricity theft in South Africa?
Electricity theft is a major problem for us in South Africa. If you look at the amount of energy that is stolen, maybe translate it into revenue, because then people start to understand it when you start talking about rands and cents. Close to 5 billion rands that we're losing on an annual basis. That is through theft. And many people, when they start to think of electricity theft, they only start thinking about your illegal connections. But there are major problems, bigger than illegal connections, where people tamper with their meters so that they don't necessarily show the amount of energy that it's supposed to be showing. So if, for an example, you have a 3-phase meter, you cut 2 of those phases and only 1 phase is registering what you're supposed to be paying, then you end up paying a third of what you're supposed to be paying. And that happens in your businesses, it happens in your large power users, it happens in residential environments. But unfortunately, people don't necessarily see that, because it's actually it's not in your face, like illegal connections, for an example.
Yeah. So this is the reality. People tampering with their meters, and of course the illegal connections, the use of illegal connections. Yes. I mean, this is billions of rands you're talking about, as you put a price to it. How detrimental is it to Eskom?
Look, if we didn't lose that amount of money, that's revenue that we should be getting. Of course, many people will say it's a drop in the ocean compared to the revenue that Eskom is supposed to be getting. But it's a lot of money that we could be electrifying houses, that we could be using to improve the services that we offer to our clients. So one cannot take it very lightly. It's expected in a electricity distribution or electricity generation environment that you lose some of the energy that you actually generated. But we are saying the amount that we're losing, we cannot be happy that we're losing that amount. We need to manage it and manage it to the levels where we are comfortable. At the moment, we are saying we are not comfortable. That's why we actually started a program called Energy Loss Management Program that manages the losses downwards. When we started this program, losses were actually going up. And then we said we cannot leave it to actually go up like that. At that time, when we looked at it in terms of the levels where it was, people were saying to us, you must be out of your minds. You don't have a problem. Because when you're comparing with other utilities globally, you are actually in the top performing utilities in terms of energy losses management. So you shouldn't be going on a program that is actually trying to manage it. But we're saying the trend at which it was going, the upward trend for us was actually worrying. Yeah. And we said we need to then do something about it. That's why we actually did that.
What about Operation Khanyisa? It's been in effect since 2010. Have you seen a decrease since this was implemented?
Operation Khanyisa is a phase of the energy loss management program. It's the public domain phase, because I'm sure people will not necessarily hear what is happening in the background in terms of meter audits that we're doing, disconnections that we're doing. So what we then decided to do is to say, let's bring this to the public domain so that people understand. So we go on an advertising campaign to say, South Africa, there's a problem out there. This is how we're dealing with it. Help us to actually look at it and deal with it with us. So in Operation Khanyisa, I can say, yes, it actually added a lot of value for us. We have received more than 8,000 tip-offs where people are actually phoning in and sending us SMSs and saying, my neighbor is stealing, my company is stealing. So Eskom and then municipalities will then take that information and go and actually see that meter that they have actually sent us information on. And then I think it's very important when people send us information to give us detailed information, because that anonymous SMS that you send, we cannot come back to you and say, by the way, what is the address of your neighbor that you're talking about here? So you need to give us information, full information, to say it's my neighbor, house number, so and so it's stealing.
What are convictions like? I mean, what is, what happens to people that are found guilty of this?
You know, in the past, it used to be very difficult to even, take a case to court of energy theft, because people thought it's not a crime. And now we've actually pushed very hard to a point where we're actually starting to get convictions. Very slow, unfortunately, but I think we're actually getting in the right direction. The courts are now starting to listen to us.
Yeah.
The courts are starting to open cases, and we are seeing, magistrates and judges really giving sentences that are, I think, starting to actually show that this thing is a problem and we need to deal with it.
Give us an example.
An example, I think a case that we can always talk about is a case that happened in the South Gauteng High Court, where two individuals were actually sentenced to 15 years and 18 years in prison. So these guys were actually stolen Eskom vending machines, and they were selling electricity to our customers illegally. And that is another problem that we have, but we managed to get them, got them through the courts, and they were sentenced. Their assets were forfeited as well.
Yeah.
So that is, I think it's a case that we can actually always demonstrate to say, now the courts are listening to us. In lower courts, we also, sorry?
And that's an indication of how harsh this crime is,
exactly.
And how bad it is.
Yeah, and I'm saying also in lower courts, we're starting to see, cases getting through the courts. Recently in Limpopo, in fact, in December in Limpopo, we've had about 2 or 3 arrests where people actually, what we call, runners who go into our customer base and start to recruit them to buy electricity illegally. We found those, and then we actually arrested some of those.
We've spoken about the illegal connections, but there's also another huge problem, and of course that's that of cable theft.
Yes.
How are you winning the battle against that? Because that, I can imagine, is another very, very difficult thing to try and combat, but it's causing absolute havoc.
Huge havoc. I mean, when you listen on the radio or over the TV in the morning to say how train is standing still because there's an illegal our cable is stolen.
Yeah.
And I mean, that says to you the economy is actually standing still because somebody decided to just go and cut a short piece of wire, which they sell in the scrap market for very little. But they actually stop our economy. I mean, in Baragwana, 2 days or so ago, I had, doctors had to operate using torch because the lights were down,
stolen.
and because of stolen cables. And I think that for me it's actually not on. We're calling on South Africans to really be vigilant on this. If you see somebody doing that, report so that we can then deal with them. But then again, we're also then saying to the scrap dealers out there, don't buy any cable that you don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
If somebody comes to you to sell cable, just make sure that you actually check with them the origin of this cable, so that you don't encourage people to actually go and steal them.
So that is the tip-off line. It is anonymous, 32211. It's the same as the crime line, is that correct?
That's the crime line,
So
yes,
that's the crime line.
We're using the crime line.
All right, we're using the crime line. You use that number, but as we were saying, we need the details. So you need to supply an address of where you saw this happening, what business this was being conducted in. We need a little bit of business. You don't have to put your name, but please send these tip-offs, because, as you've heard, this is costing the country billions and billions of rands. Maboe, thank you. Thanks for talking to us here on the program. Maboe Maphaka is Eskom's Senior Manager in the Energy Trading and Sales Forecasting Department at Eskom.